Welcome, Gary Bolles, a leader on the Transforming the Future of Work.
Good morning. That's not going to do. Good morning. I flew in from Sao Paulo last night at midnight after lecturing there. I'm taking a plane at midnight tonight to Las Vegas. And I want to thank Jemiah and Angela and the team for allowing me to be able to stop here and offer you a few thoughts, spark a few thoughts, I guess. You can see my bio. I'm not going to talk about that. Instead, I want to talk about you. I want to talk about... I think it's going to let me do this. Seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? Can I move? All right, so I want to talk about you. I'm very fond of the word transform. I'm the global chair for transformation for Singularity University, a global think tank. And I want to talk about how you can think about transformation of your organization, especially with a lot of the processes that people are talking about and where some of the biggest challenges but opportunities exist for doing that. So what do you want? You could wave a magic wand. What do you want? You want a flow of human talent. You want to be able to have a range of talent available to your organization. The old way we would show your organization is we would show a hierarchy. We'd show an org chart. But I believe it's going to be not a workforce in the future, not a network, but a work net. It's going to be a flow of human talent. But the challenge is that the way that many organizations, especially traditional organizations, think about that flow of talent is that there can be barriers. There can be something that stops that flow of talent. And if there's any sort of fulcrum point, my organization, Charette, we tend to call many of our initiatives fulcrum because we're always looking for the places we can have the most impact to pull the lever and move the world. If there's one fulcrum point that we find over and over again in our work, it's the mindset of the hiring manager. The mindset of the hiring manager. Why is that? What is it about the traditional role of the manager that creates this potential stopping point for the flow of talent? Well, the truth is that hiring has a set of requirements. There's a number of things that you need in a work role. And by dialing down the flow to more reliable historical markers, such as a degree or years of experience, what you do is you manage risk. Hiring is just risk management. If you knew with absolute certainty that the next person to walk through the door was the perfect hire, in quotation marks, you'd hire them. And if they knew yours was the perfect organization, they'd say yes. But you don't know that. So we create processes to manage risk. How do you take risk out of the equation? How do you reduce risk? Well, there's only really two ways. You either dial down the risk or you increase the incentives and the opportunities. So let's talk about that process and how we might involve, as they were just talking about, stars. How can we get people who were skilled through alternative routes? So I used to do a lot of projects with Google since 2005, a lot of consulting for them. I would never get hired at Google because I don't have enough college to stuff into a thimble. I was always not only the person with the least formal education in the room in the projects that I did with them, I was also the oldest, so they wouldn't hire me for my age either. But the basic premise is there's all of these alternative skills through these routes. How do we change that? Well, that person who's at the fulcrum, the hiring manager, we have to talk about their mindset, but also their skill set and their tool set. So what do we need to do? We need to help them to think about those requirements in the context of the problems to be solved and the skills that can be brought. If we just focus on the tasks, if we take the job description for the former person who had it and we just slap a little paint on it and we put it out there on Indeed.com, we're going to get the same results over and over again. So we have to change that mindset so they think about problems and skills. Why? Work is just three things. It's just three things. It's a problem to be solved. How do we solve problems? We perform tasks. How do we perform tasks? We have human skills. That's work. Human skills applied to tasks to solve problems. And you can kind of figure out where AI comes in. Not going to spend a lot of time on AI. But that's it. This is human work. And what we do so often is we think about those requirements to dial down risk by saying, can they perform these specific tasks people have performed so often in the past? Well, there's an opportunity to change that process, to make it a a sequence of co-designing the ways that work roles are defined. Think of it first as that hiring manager, not my favorite label, I'll give you another one in just a second, but think of that hiring manager as someone who is catalyzing a process of co-creation in defining what are the problems to be solved in this work role. Who can help me to understand those problems? What does the team bring in terms of their mindset and skill set? And how do we figure out the ways to be able to co-design that work role? And then with candidates, with people, use the processes for understanding more about their skills, for helping them to be part of that process of co-designing the work role. And so the more overlap you can get between the ways that you've defined the problems to be solved and the skills that are needed, the more flexible you can actually create those work roles. So that's the mindset. What about the skill set? How do we transform the hiring manager? Well, I think we need to change the label. The traditional role of the manager, of the supervisor. My friend Esther Wojcicki has a great book called Moonshots in Education. And she says that the role of the teacher needs to shift from the sage on the stage, the one with all the answers, to the guide on the side, the one with all the best questions. And I think that is the skill set change for that hiring manager. We need to change the label to a team guide, somebody who is there to be able to ask great questions, to understand the mindset and skill set of the team, to be able to design work roles in the context of problems and skills, continually help people to be able to develop the skill set to solve new problems. We need to have that person be able to make that attraction process, a team sport involving a variety of people, to be able to find the right kind of talent to pull into the flow of the organization. We need to change the mindset where you think of skills as an enterprise resource. In the old rules of work, that was any employee of a team, of a manager, was a wholly owned subsidiary. That all the wrong incentives in place to try to retain that talent. And instead, we need to help that team guide to be able to think completely differently about skills, human resources within the organization, and make it flexible. And then I mentioned dialing down the risk. We also have to increase incentives and opportunity. Because if you don't change the way that they're incentivized, the way that they're compensated, to be able to change the rules, change the process, they're not going to take the risk. I had the pleasure of lecturing in Mexico last year, and I sat next to the provost of the University of Toronto. And she said she had all of these requirements to change their hiring practices, and nobody was doing it. And she went to all of her deans, and she said, I will pay half the salary of anybody you hire from outside our standard profile for the next 2 years. And 3 of her departments within 6 months blasted past their requirements. And so it's this process of continually co-creating with that team guide what that approach could be. Now, we've talked about mindset, we've talked about skill set. What about the tool set? Can you leverage this next generation set of tools through this process? Absolutely. I'm not saying it's a magic wand. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet. But you can leverage these technologies to help that process of dialing down the risk and increasing the opportunity to bring in new skill sets. So the more that your organization, any hirer, thinks in terms of skills, has its own skills ontology, has the process of being able to define work roles in the context of skills, the more flexible it can be. The more that your organization thinks about that process as being guided with this support, think of it as a virtual coach for that team guide, as they're looking at different skill sets and trying to build that collaborative idea of how a team can be most effective. This is one of the things that large language models do very well, is synthesizing information, including skills information. And then finally, think about ways of redesigning the incentive process to support that team guide in the process of understanding that there's talent that could be transferable, that could actually solve the problems that need to be solved, even though you're not looking at the traditional metrics and the traditional process. So the way you get that flow of human talent, and this is what I believe the organization of the future is going to be. It's going to have soft walls. It's going to have a range of people that are helping to solve the problems of today and tomorrow in a variety of different use cases, is to be able to change the mindset, skill set, and the tool set. So of that team guide, of that person at the fulcrum. So my bad. That's actually the QR code for my book. Sorry about that. Angela asked me to bring some books, but I couldn't bring them from Brazil. So, but if you just find me on LinkedIn, this is coming out next month. It's a PDF free. And we'll send you, this is the team guidebook. And this has a lot of the techniques that I'm talking about. We'll also send you, tomorrow I'm doing a skills workshop at the Unleash Las Vegas conference. And I'll send you that as well. That's a playbook for transitioning to a skills-based organization. So that's my offer and my request. Think about transformation. Think about continuous transformation. Think about helping that person that has the power to hire to change their mindset, skill set, and tool set so you can continually transform your organization. Thank you.